If you have ongoing exposure to controlling people, it's a virtual certainty that you're going to experience blurry boundaries, which is why I've created the extensive online course called This Is Me, Establishing Boundaries with the Controllers in Your Life. There's a link below that will give you all of the details, and I hope that you would find it therapeutic. Every one of us has natural inclinations that we're born with. We have an inborn temperament. We have certain skills and inclinations. Some are extroverted, some are introverted, some are creative, some are very mechanically oriented, etc. And much of what we are is just what we come into the world with. But then if you've had ongoing exposure to a strongly narcissistic person, you can't just get away from that person unscathed. Narcissists have such a strong need to be in control, and they have such a need to be superior that they don't want you to be who you were meant to be. They're going to come at you with behaviors and attitudes and beliefs that actually become your norm, even though it's abnormal. Narcissists are known for, we'll use the word brainwashing. They want to eliminate your uniqueness and your distinction and fill you with themselves. Let me give you a couple examples of how sometimes this can become an awareness in people's lives. I remember talking with a young man who had a friend, and the friend introduced him to his own father, and they had some experiences with that father. And the friend's father was helpful and kind and just seemed to be quite willing to say, well, let's flow with what you have to do. And this young man was telling me, I didn't know what to do with a man like that. I was not exposed to something of that nature. It's because his own father was very tyrannical and very harsh and mean-spirited, and he was completely afraid. And it's like, so is this normal or is this normal? Which one is it? Or I recall talking with a woman who had been in a work setting, and she changed jobs, and at the job, they actually asked her, well, how would you like to handle this? And her response was, the last place I was at, I had such a miserable person that I worked for that it just kind of took away any kind of hope that anybody would really care about who I am. When you've been exposed to abuse, then you start to get fuzzy with respect to what's normal and what's not normal. Simply put, narcissists have such a strong need to superimpose that they become bullies. And they insist that you're supposed to think and feel and behave and prioritize just as they tell you. And if you're too independent or if you're too distinct, it's like, no, we're not going to do that. And so as a result, in their abuse toward you, they can coerce, they can invalidate, they can intimidate, they can stifle the real you, and the net result can be you having struggles with your own internal anger. Sometimes you struggle with depression or anxiety, or you get rebellious attitudes. You become emotionally needy or uncertain or insecure. You respond in kind to the narcissist and the way they treat you. Perhaps you're susceptible to addictions, things of that nature. And what happens is it says your life skills have been altered because you have someone who is deliberately trying to steer you into a negative direction. You stay subordinate to me. Now, I want to go through some of the most common indicators. It says there's an ongoing, lasting impact that narcissist has had on you. And the more you're able to see this, I'm hoping you can look at some of these as indicators that says, okay, here's where I need to learn and grow. Okay, so let's go through this with the idea of identifying how they can impact you. Now, one of the impacts that you can have when you've been narcissistically abused is that you can constantly wonder if you're good enough. No matter how successful you are, no matter how smart or capable or just reasonable you are, that narcissist is going to just whittle away at your sense of well-being. And it's like, well, I think I'm okay, but maybe not. Or it may be that that you develop too much of a tolerance for another person's non-cooperation. In other words, you find yourself feeling defeatist. it's like, it's not even worth trying to talk back to that person, because all it's going to do is lead to no good. Or on the opposite side, it may be that you can become easily triggered, and even with slight provocations, and as a result, your anger or your agitation can just be right there on the edge, and you're just kind of tense and uptight when you're around certain kind of people. Now, another indicator that a long-standing element that comes with narcissistic abuse is sometimes you have difficulty receiving help. Now, notice that my use of the word receiving. I would have lots of people through the years that would come to my office and they would seek out help. And then when we would talk about some of the adjustments that could be made, it's like, I don't know if I can do that. So they know they need help, but sometimes they have a difficulty applying it. It's like, well, the maladaptive stuff that I have going on, it's my familiarity zone. And as a result, they can feel stuck. Sometimes after you've been abused and it's an ongoing kind of thing, you can be prone towards over-interpreting someone else's separateness. It's like, you don't care about me, do you? Or you're rejecting me, or you did that on purpose. And they're over there. It's like, no, none of that. Well, but in your mind, it's like, well, if you're too separate and we're not in agreement, there's probably something bad going on. What is it? In addition, part of the impact of narcissistic abuse is you can either accept blame and shame way too easily, and you can be motivated with fear and guilt, or you can give shame and blame too easily. Either way, shame and blame becomes part of your currency. Judgment and worried about a person's status, and as a result, that's how you think. That's how you filter who you are and who other people are. Now, on top of that, part of the impact of the abuse is that you can become a participant in non-productive arguments. I want you to think, how many times with that narcissistic person have you thought, well, I want to talk to that person. I want to see if we can figure out how we can do things better. And it turns quickly into or devolves quickly into a very non-productive way of discussing, where you're told how you don't know what you're talking about, and before you know it, you're defending and all the rest. And so that becomes part of your norm. In addition, you might be someone who apologizes too easily. Or it may be that you take the opposite, and it's like, I refuse to tell anybody what's wrong with me because it's not going to work out very well anyway. And so you have difficulties in that realm. Or it could be that you do what we refer to as fawning, and basically you appease. You try to figure out, okay, what do I have to do to keep this person satisfied and keep them off my back? I'll just do anything to make peace around here. Or it could be that over the long haul, maladaptive relationship skills just take over. You can have easy agitation and criticism and unnecessary withdrawal, defensiveness, things of that nature, because that's what your norm is. That's what you've become accustomed to. So we know that narcissistic abuse is real, and it can have a long-standing impact. But the question is it possible for you to recover from that? Now, what would you say what would you think if I was saying, nope, you can't recover? Well, of course you can. That's the whole reason that I do the work that I do. I believe that you can be resilient and you can get beyond that. In order to do so, there are certain things that you're going to need to ponder, and I'm going to run through it. And obviously, if you could use some help with somebody, a therapist, to help sift this out, that would be all the better. First and foremost, as you go into a recovery mode, I'm hoping that you can become keenly aware of the abuser's psychological makeup. One of the reasons people like me talk about some of the dysfunction they bring is not just to condemn them, but it's for us to remind you, guaranteed that person who's being abusive is damaged. And that person has all sorts of chaos on the inside. And the question is, do you want that individual to become your filter? Is that the one who sets your pace? So first and foremost, educate yourself with respect to who that person is and what their deep history is and what their patterns are and how they came to be that way, and know that they're going to be the way they are, whether it's you or anyone else on the scene. And so develop a type of objectivity. Then a second thing as part of your recovery is be extremely honest with yourself about your own maladaptive patterns that have developed. Do you really need to argue like I just mentioned? Do you really need to defend as strongly as you do? Do you have good plans for healthy anger versus the unhealthy forms? What are you going to do when it's obvious that other people don't coordinate well with you? Do you have a well-conceived idea of how that's going to be? But be honest with respect to what your trends and tendencies and patterns are that lead you in the wrong direction. And then take it further and ask, what does a healthy self-esteem look like? Can you have calm confidence? Can you have appropriate assertiveness and self-affirmation? And can you develop objectivity when the other folks are coming at you with all sorts of emotionally loaded kind of topics? Do you trust yourself? And then what does it, another thing as part of your recovery is, what does healthy boundaries look like? One of the problems that we have with people who have been psychologically abused by narcissists is they have very blurry boundaries. And so many times you can have either too loose of a boundary. It's like, well, I'm just going to let people get away with things, or you're too rigid. Boundaries means you have a good definition for yourself. When you stay inside your definition and others aren't going to pull you away from that, what does that mean? What does that look like? And then also, part of your recovery is you asking yourself, how do I define love? How do I define decency? And how do I define respect? What are the healthy characteristics that I want to have central to who I am so that I can move forward, knowing that their impact is not going to be permanent in the negative direction? Now, it sounds real easy when good old Les Carter kind of maps it out like this, but what I'm saying here to you today is a reminder that says there's lots of work that needs to be done when you've been exposed to narcissistic abuse, but it can be done. And so I'm hoping that each time you find yourself slipping back into some of the behaviors that are common when you've been bullied by that narcissist, that you can remind yourself, whenever I make a mistake, that's an opportunity for me to learn. Yes, I have old patterns that haven't worked for me, but I am indeed that lifelong learner, and I am not going to succumb to the messages that the narcissist put in my mind. I have the rest of my life to work it out. Watch what's going to happen, because good things are going to come. I'm committed to it. I'm resolved. Now, I hope that videos like this can give you some good food for thought and inspiration. I'm hoping for your own adjustment. Thank you for allowing me to be on your journey with you. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do so, and we'll keep more videos coming towards you. Hit the bell that goes along with it, and then we'll give you it'll give you notifications. Now, through the years, I've been sponsored by the people at BetterHelp.com, and you know I'm a therapist, and I recommend therapy very easily. If you have a need, we've learned that online therapy can be quite effective, and there's a link below the video that will take you to the people at BetterHelp. You have to answer a few questions, and then you can select a therapist that can work with you. It can be so good for someone to say, let's break this down. Let's get an understanding of what you're dealing with, what the patterns are, and the impact it's had on you, so that you don't have to live under the burden of the narcissistic abuse. Get the help as the need is there. Now, on top of that, I've put together courses. This is part of my 40 years of being in the therapy office, and I've pulled together all sorts of thoughts in some of the courses, where each course has at least 25 teaching videos, and each video has handouts and then guided questions. We have anger games about not getting pulled into their traps with respect to that. This is me about establishing those boundaries. Free to be, finding yourself despite the controllers. Ready, Set, Connect, about having good connection skills. On my website, we have access also to my webinars, which are 90-minute presentations of a very different nature and extensive PowerPoints, and they've proven to be quite popular. In addition to that, we have access to my podcast, articles, my books, lots of resources. Narcissists indeed are bullies, and they want to take what you started with, and they want to flatten you out and just fill you with who they are, and we're not going to let that happen. So I hope that you can indeed have that sense that says, I'm going to be a lifelong learner, I'm going to understand who I am and what I'm dealing with, and then I'm resolved towards the much healthier alternative. And when that happens, it positions you to become more and more of a person of steadiness. And I hope that in the end, you can actually be in your place of peace. I so want you to have internal peace.